Chapter 1. What's Ethan Carter so busy with? Is he so caught up in work that he doesn't have time to care for his wife and child? After completing the final step of my prenatal checkup, I met my mom and once again heard her complaints. It's been nearly 9 months, and he still lets you go to these appointments alone? Men are just not reliable at all. The hallway was bustling with people, and my mom spoke loudly, her words directed at Ethan Carter, but I felt embarrassed. She placed her hand on my increasingly round belly, her eyes unable to hide her displeasure. Come on, Mom, he's on a business trip. He actually planned to return early to accompany me, but I told him it wasn't necessary. I consider myself to have pretty good health, apart from recently experiencing more anemia. The other pregnancy symptoms have been manageable. Most of the time, the baby in my belly is quite well behaved and doesn't trouble me much. I've always been independent, preferring to handle things on my own rather than rely on anyone, even those closest to me. Ethan Carter both loves and hates this trait of mine. Sometimes he appreciates my trust and self-reliance, but other times he wishes I'd lean on him and act a bit more dependent. Just as I finished speaking, he called. My mom helped me sit down to rest, then turned to gather the medical papers without looking at me again. Ethan Carter asked about my health with great concern, saying he was still in City D but almost done with work. He mentioned he'd have dinner with a client and then catch the latest high-speed train back to City B. Is Olivia Smith back too? Is she doing okay? Does your project suit her? Olivia Smith has been my best friend since childhood, and Ethan Carter, my closest friend since elementary school. This year, she just transferred to work in Ethan Carter's project department, but the two have never gotten along. According to Olivia Smith, she has always disliked Ethan Carter's seemingly humble yet fake demeanor. On the other hand, Ethan Carter cannot stand Olivia Smith's arrogance and cold attitude. Ethan Carter spoke in his usual unfriendly tone. My wife already told me. Do you think I'd dare do otherwise? He turned to me and began to whine. Hey, what's up with you? Can't you care about your husband a bit more? All day long, it's just Olivia Smith this, Olivia Smith that. We joked around for a bit, and I wished him a safe trip before hanging up the phone. My mom, holding back her frustration, helped me down to the parking lot to get the car. On the way home, she continued to grumble. I was nearly fed up with her nagging, wishing Ethan Carter would return home as soon as possible to save me from this situation. However, while waiting at a red light, I casually scrolled through my phone and stumbled upon something strange. A minute ago, Olivia Smith had just posted something on social media. Under dim lighting, her hands were tied with a necktie, lying on a bed in a hotel room with white sheets. The scene was seductive, and beneath the photo was the caption, "Business trip, watching games, slaying beasts." I was about to leave a comment, shocked that she had suddenly transformed overnight after years of being reserved, but then I was stunned by the necktie in the picture. A gray-blue striped tie with a bright red heart design, a limited edition, identical to the birthday gift I gave Ethan Carter. Noah, how many times have I told you to use your phone less? Aren't you afraid of going blind? My mom's voice rang out again beside me, but I pretended not to hear. I immediately clicked on Olivia Smith's profile picture to access her page, but the post had disappeared. As if nothing had happened. Maybe I was just seeing things. The car started moving again, but my stomach suddenly twisted in pain. My vision blurred, and I gradually lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was lying on a hospital bed, receiving a blood transfusion. Outside the window, the sky had already turned dark. Lately, I haven't had much of an appetite. I ate very little at lunch, and my anemia relapsed. I used to pride myself on being healthy, but after seeing that horrifying photo, I didn't expect to faint from fright. When I opened my eyes, I saw my mother sitting there with a worried expression, her eyes red. I gently placed my hand on my round belly, feeling a sharp pain in my heart. You always make me worry. Marrying someone from a modest family, and now, not even a year later, you're pregnant. I raised you on my own, hoping you'd marry into wealth and live comfortably, but instead, you my mother's familiar complaints echoed daily, making me feel extremely uneasy. I knew she was afraid I'd suffer. Ever since my father passed away, she had endured too much hardship raising me alone. When I first started dating Ethan Carter, my mother disapproved of his family background, fearing I would face difficulties if I married him. But in reality, I'm the head of a brand design team, earning a decent income. Ethan Carter isn't doing badly either. He's steadily advancing in his career, receiving raises, and now independently leads a project team. We've even upgraded to a new car and bought a new house. The baby in my belly is about to be born, and everything seems to be going in the right direction. If it weren't for that bizarre social media post, I would have dismissed my mother's words as useless chatter and ignored them. Our family doesn't have the same privileges as Olivia Smith's. There's no need to worry, but if Ethan Carter is so busy that he's never home, even when you're sick and need him, what's the point of earning all that money? I've heard these words countless times, but now they feel even more bitter. If I wasn't hallucinating before I fainted, then what was that strange photo? What's been going on for years between Ethan Carter and Olivia Smith? I just want to call them right away. I don't like beating around the bush, I want to ask directly. Just as I picked up the phone, the hospital room door suddenly swung open. Ethan Carter rushed in, dragging a suitcase behind him. The photo had been deleted, leaving no evidence, but I didn't want the misunderstanding to linger. I asked him directly, "Where's the striped tie I gave you?" "Tie?" Ethan Carter was surprised for a second, then calmly approached and gently hugged me. I wasn't sure if I was being overly sensitive, but I caught a faint scent of cigarette smoke on him, mixed with a hint of women's perfume, a fragrance unfamiliar to me, so subtle it was almost undetectable. But Ethan Carter had quit smoking long before I started preparing for pregnancy. "It's in the suitcase, what's wrong? Are you still feeling unwell?" I weakly pushed him away, my eyes gradually welling up with tears. "Take it out and show me." Ethan Carter frowned slightly, but said nothing. He placed the suitcase down and pulled out the tie I had given him as a birthday gift. A gray-blue striped tie, neatly rolled up, with the red heart still perfectly in place. It looked completely normal. It seemed as if the social media post I had seen was just a nightmare I had imagined. Ethan Carter and I locked eyes. He looked utterly composed, making me feel like an unreasonable fool. Since becoming pregnant, I had rarely lost control of my emotions. Work and the team always push me forward, while Ethan Carter's busyness has taught me to cultivate more patience. Meanwhile, my mother's constant worries inadvertently add pressure on me. Deep inside, there's a voice reminding me not to lose control, not to let myself be swayed by hormones. Only at night, during moments when the baby moves gently, or when I see Ethan Carter's hand resting around my waist during sleepless nights, do I feel a vague sense of anxiety. I used to fear being unable to balance work and raising a child, worried about my changing figure, and even paranoid that the person lying next to me might have a change of heart. "Ethan Carter, I've told you already, what's so special about that torn tie that you have to examine it so closely?" My mother couldn't help but scold. "Can't you take care of your wife first? Her belly is so big, and she even fainted from anemia. All you ever think about is business trips. All you care about is earning money." "I'm sorry, Mom. It won't happen again. I've already spoken to the company, and I won't go on any business trips in the coming months. From now on, I'll always be by Emily's side. Please don't be upset, it's not good for your health." Ethan Carter held my hand tightly, the warmth from his palm transferring to the back of mine, his eyes filled with concern. "I'm sorry, Emily, for making you uncomfortable." I felt slightly emotional and couldn't help but wonder if I had misjudged him. At that very moment, my belly moved distinctly. Ethan Carter noticed it too, and his eyes were filled with the excitement of a soon-to-be father. He gently placed his hand on my belly and started talking to the baby. "Daddy came home late. I'm sorry for making you and Mommy go through so much." My eyes suddenly stung. Ethan Carter had silently worked hard for this family, enduring no small amount of hardship. Our marriage was never easy, perhaps I shouldn't have doubted him. Just as my hand touched his back, Olivia Smith burst into the hospital room. She completely ignored the closeness between Ethan Carter and me, rushing straight toward me with a genuinely worried expression. But as she got closer, I caught a subtle scent that mingled with the faint trace of cigarette smoke from earlier. The sensitivity I felt moments ago seemed to have found its answer. Chapter 2. Emily, why are you anemic again? Look at how pale your face is. I've told you to eat on time. Olivia Smith frowned, glancing at me for 2 seconds before turning to greet my mom. Her expression remained as cold as ever when she looked at Ethan Carter. Olivia Smith, dear, you came over this late at night? Quickly help me manage this Emily girl. She's got me worrying about her all day long. My mom started her usual endless nagging. Olivia Smith's face stayed expressionless, but her hands were gentle as always. As usual, she lightly pinched my ear and didn't forget to shoot me a glare. A strange mix of emotions stirred within me. My belly had grown large, my body felt heavy, and after fainting today, I truly felt drained. Tonight, for the first time, I didn't want to pretend to be strong anymore. In front of me were 3 people all worried about me. Having someone to lean on should have made me feel content and happy. I sincerely hoped that everything was just me overthinking. Your hands are so cold. Take this to warm them up. Olivia Smith snatched my hand from Ethan Carter's grip and placed a warming pouch into my palm, enveloping my hands in comforting heat. I looked up at her, my mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. During the past few months of pregnancy, as Ethan Carter became increasingly busy, the person who had been by my side more often was Olivia Smith. She accompanied me to prenatal checkups, helped me register, waited in line, and collected my prescriptions. She cooked red date porridge for me, worried about my severe anemia, and even researched customized meal plans for me. Before she transferred to Ethan Carter's company, whenever he went on business trips, Olivia Smith would always show up at my house on time, trying to take care of me with various delicious dishes. In my pregnancy journal, nearly every entry included Olivia Smith's presence. Looking over at Ethan Carter, he had already gotten up from me, bowing his head in silence without casting a single glance at Olivia Smith. Previously, their coldness and lack of communication wouldn't have been unusual, as they never really liked each other. But after seeing that photo, and now observing the 2 of them, even without exchanging words, the silence between them exuded an unusual, strange tension. The post Olivia Smith suddenly deleted, and the faint unfamiliar scent lingering on Ethan Carter, all of it left me feeling both irritated and confused. For the first time, Olivia Smith felt unfamiliar to me. For the first time, I didn't want to see her. And for the first time, I was afraid of losing her. Noticing I wasn't feeling well, Olivia Smith gave me a few more words of advice, telling me to rest properly. She then nodded briefly at Ethan Carter and left the hospital room. After she left, my mother couldn't help but meddle in someone else's business. Olivia Smith is already grown up, so why hasn't she found anyone yet? At my spa, there are so many wealthy ladies and rich families. One day, I should introduce her to a few prospects. Before I could say anything, Ethan Carter spoke up first. Mom, Olivia Smith has high standards. She wouldn't be interested in those rich guys. His sudden interjection seemed to hit just the right nerve to irritate my mother. I'm talking about Olivia Smith's business. What does that have to do with you? You should worry about your own wife. I didn't want to get involved in their argument, but deep down, I felt an unclear urge to seek answers. It's true that Olivia Smith has unique tastes. She's been different from me since we were kids. Ethan, don't you think your student, Liam Parker, would be a great match for Olivia Smith? Why don't you try setting them up? Before I could finish, Ethan Carter immediately objected. He's not the one. My gaze darkened as I stared intently at Ethan Carter, as though the answer I dreaded was slowly coming into focus. Let's deal with it later. Right now, your health is the most important thing. I'll call the nurse and take you home in a bit. He seemed to sense that something was amiss, clamped his mouth shut, and walked out of the hospital room. After parting ways with my mother, Ethan Carter and I headed home. The entire ride was filled with silence. I pretended to feel unwell to mask my own frustration. I truly didn't want to delve deeper into this matter. Even if Ethan Carter had done something behind my back, there was no way that person could be Olivia Smith. When we arrived home, he wrapped me in his arms. Ethan Carter knelt halfway on the newly purchased Ultraman rug, quietly helping me take off my shoes. He even brought out a basin of water to wash my face and hands, attending to me meticulously as always. Whenever he wasn't away for work, Ethan Carter was always so thoughtful and caring, no less attentive than Olivia Smith. Recently, he even suggested that I quit my job, wanting me to become a full-time homemaker, saying he could provide for me and our child. We argued about it, though I understood he only wanted to spare me from exhaustion, worrying I wouldn't be able to balance work and childcare. Before moving to B-City, Olivia Smith, Ethan Carter, and I had been neighbors in the same community and classmates in elementary school. Back then, the two of them never got along. Olivia Smith never played with boys, and Ethan Carter was the model student, obedient and well-behaved. I was the only one running around, constantly darting back and forth between the two of them. Later, both my family and Olivia Smith's family moved to B-City, and Ethan Carter gradually became distant from our lives. After that, my father passed away in a car accident, my mother became increasingly irritable, while Olivia Smith's parents became more successful in business and had no time to care for her. The two of us children could only lean on each other. It wasn't easy for my mother to open a beauty spa. She had to force a smile for customers during the day and vent her frustrations on me at home, sometimes criticizing me for not being as academically talented as Olivia Smith, other times scolding me for being obsessed with drawing instead of studying. But Olivia Smith always stood by my side. She defended me not only in front of my mother but in all matters. Even though we had completely different tastes and preferences, Olivia Smith was always willing to accommodate me. She followed the idols I liked, watched the movies I watched, ate my favorite dishes like pork intestines and snail noodles, scared off those who mocked me for not having a father, chased away bullies, praised my artwork, and helped me improve my academic performance. Thanks to her encouragement, I found the courage to pursue my dream of becoming a designer. When we went to college, Olivia Smith studied abroad, while I was admitted to the Fine Arts program at University B. During the days without her, I worked harder but also felt a deep sense of loneliness. In a charity event during the final semester of my junior year, I coincidentally reunited with Ethan Carter, an old friend I hadn't seen in a long time. He was the organizer of the event, guiding me in seeking sponsorships, handling design work, and adjusting plans. He always appreciated my proposals and supported my creative ideas. In the end, our team won a major award, and I caught the attention of a renowned company in the industry, receiving an internship offer. During our busy moments, he and I often reminisced about our silly childhood memories and dreamed together of a bright future. Ethan Carter's excellence and ambition attracted me, while his thoughtfulness and sincerity made me feel warm inside. I suddenly realized that I, too, could be cherished by many. After the charity event concluded successfully, we organized a celebratory party, and everyone decided to go singing together. Ethan Carter accompanied me, and several times, he tried to hold my hand. In the karaoke room, I chose the song Ultraman by Yoo Ja-yoon, saying that I wanted to dedicate it to my Ultraman. Who likes me, who comes close to me, still can't compare to your gaze. I don't need you to save the world. I know sometimes you're sad too. It's just that they don't understand. Perhaps we can't grow old together. But I will fly toward your cloud, carrying my greetings with me. That was my subtle confession, as well as my most heartfelt gratitude. I was thankful to him for appreciating me, encouraging me, lending me a hand in my journey to pursue my dreams, and bringing light into my life when it was unsteady and dim. When the song ended, he hugged me and confessed his feelings, asking in front of everyone if I would be his girlfriend. Chapter 3. After the internship ended, I was offered a position at my current company with a compensation package higher than the industry average. I shared the good news with Olivia Smith, and despite the time zone difference, she was genuinely happy for me during our phone call. Around the same time, Ethan Carter also joined a major company and was quickly made a permanent employee thanks to his abilities. On our anniversary, coinciding with Olivia Smith's return to the country, I brought her along to meet Ethan Carter. After raising our glasses, I introduced them to each other. However, it seemed that as adults, they didn't quite get along. Ethan Carter remained distant throughout the evening, while Olivia Smith maintained a cold demeanor. I once asked Olivia Smith why she felt this way. She simply said she couldn't stand the pretense of someone as academically accomplished as him, but still wished me happiness. On the other hand, Ethan Carter thought she was arrogant and a bit self-centered. I didn't push them to get along and let things unfold naturally. Things took an unexpected turn when Olivia Smith switched jobs to Ethan Carter's company and ended up in the project team he was leading. Looking back now, perhaps their relationship started to shift subtly from that point, but I didn't pay much attention. A few months ago, after they returned from a business trip to City X, I went to the airport to pick them up. Ethan Carter handed me a commemorative t-shirt, saying it was a gift for me. Seeing the chibi Ultraman design on the shirt, my heart melted at how adorable it was. He mentioned he had one too, then pulled back his jacket to show me, a small Ultraman graphic on the left chest. Leaning close, he whispered sweetly into my ear, "I'm your very own Ultraman." During lunch, I went to the restroom and happened to see Olivia Smith taking off her jacket, revealing the t-shirt underneath. On the left side of her chest was a small beast design, drawn precisely over her heart. At that moment, I felt something strange, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Olivia simply said she thought the shirt was pretty and didn't want to interfere with the sweetness between me and my husband, so she casually picked a different design. I didn't think much of it then. Now, looking back, my stomach churns with unease. Ethan Carter, lying beside me, is fast asleep. Trying to suppress my discomfort, I quietly slip out of bed, grab his phone, and head to the bathroom. The password is my birthdate, 0507, so I unlock it easily. Scrolling through his friends list, nothing seems unusual, until I reach the very bottom. In the hashtag section, I notice a blank ID followed by the name Little Beast. A strong intuition pushes me to click on this person's profile. The gender is listed as male, but the friend settings indicate unable to view this person's posts and status. I once read an article online about this kind of concealment. Some boyfriends block suspicious individuals on social media to keep their girlfriends from finding out. My hands tremble as I tap on this person's posts, and then a horrifying scene appears, one that I'll never be able to erase from my memory. The latest post was made 6 hours ago. If I recall correctly, at that time I was sitting in my mom's car waiting at a red light. Under dim lighting, a pair of hands tied with a necktie appears on a hotel bed covered in white sheets. The atmosphere is seductive, and below the photo is a caption, "Business trips, watching games, fighting monsters." The tie looked very familiar, gray-blue stripes with a red heart design, a limited edition, identical to the one Ethan Carter had taken out of the suitcase. I was completely stunned. It turned out Olivia Smith's post wasn't deleted, she had just posted it in the wrong place. That humiliating photo was still here, on her small account named Little Monster. My heart ached in waves. I kept scrolling down and discovered even more disgusting things. The personal page of Little Monster felt like another world of Olivia Smith, filled with dark secrets and a version of her completely unfamiliar to me. A cigarette at the company's fire escape with teasing words, passionate kisses in the underground parking lot, even tearful goodbyes right outside my apartment hallway, all of it was documented by her as sweet memories. They shamelessly enjoyed the stolen time from me, indulging in the thrill of forbidden moments, without a hint of regret or intention to stop. Olivia Smith hides secrets, indulges in guilty pleasures, yet endures grievances and even thinks of me. I felt a tingling sensation on my scalp, shocked by how she cared for me while secretly entangling herself with my man. From what I saw in that timeline, their ambiguous relationship began a few months ago. Thinking back, that was when I started experiencing obvious pregnancy symptoms, sometimes losing control of my emotions, arguing with Ethan Carter over trivial matters, even crying. But he was always tolerant, understanding that I didn't mean it, often yielding to me. I once thought I had found a wonderful man, but it turns out he was just looking elsewhere to vent his suppressed emotions. I don't know why the two of them got involved, especially when they used to be at odds, like water and fire, not even wanting to look at each other. One was the man who loved me deeply, like the morning sun, always proud of me. The other was the woman who knew me best, had been by my side since childhood, like the gentle moonlight of the night. They hid it from me so well, and this betrayal made the pain even worse. Waves of acid reflux and nausea surged up, and I couldn't help but vomit all the late-night food Ethan Carter had cooked for me. Ethan Carter, a light sleeper, rushed over as soon as he heard the noise. Seeing the phone tightly clenched in my hand, he was clearly flustered. He approached to hold my hand, intending to help me up, but I pushed him away forcefully, making him lose his grip. "Emily, what's wrong with you? Get out!" I screamed, leaving him stunned. I looked back at Ethan Carter, noticing that he was still as handsome as ever, though his face looked a bit tired, and more than that, filled with panic. I felt it was so unfair, having to endure a heavy body, a changing figure, uncontrollable emotions, and constant discomfort, all by myself. Why could Ethan Carter remain free, charming, and always comfortably indulging in new embraces? All the feelings of resentment, discomfort, and exhaustion that I had suppressed since becoming pregnant suddenly overwhelmed me. I broke down, unable to hold back my tears as they streamed down in humiliation and bitterness. Ethan Carter seemed to cling to a sliver of hope. "Emily, are you feeling really unwell? Let me take you to the hospital, okay?" He tried to ignore the fact that I had gone through his phone. For the first time, I looked at him with eyes full of hatred, as if I wanted to rip open his chest to see why his heart had changed like this. Little monster and football, are they beautiful? As soon as I finished speaking, my stomach churned again, and I couldn't hold back the wave of nausea. Chapter 4. It was strange. Ethan Carter and Olivia Smith had always been at odds with each other, except when watching football. That was the only time they could reconcile. Meanwhile, I had no interest in football. Both of them were passionate fans of the Argentina team. Football became the only opportunity for them to talk a little more. Unexpectedly, it has now turned into my worst nightmare. You saw everything, didn't you?" Ethan Carter's eyes instantly turned red. He knelt on one knee and looked up at me. His gaze was complicated, partly humble, partly relieved at being discovered. But I couldn't let him feel relieved. I slapped him hard across the face, then again, leaving his left cheek red and his right cheek gradually swelling. He didn't dare stop me, and I didn't want to stop. They didn't stop hurting me, so why should I show mercy? Is this something a human being could do? You two sneaked around behind my back, pretending to hate each other in front of me. Aren't you tired of it? I didn't want my voice to crack, but I couldn't hold it back. I knew that the moment I said those words, from this point on, I would lose the two most important people in my life. Ignoring Ethan Carter's calls, I clutched my stomach and staggered back to my room. I grabbed my phone and called my mother, asking her to come pick me up immediately. I didn't want to see Ethan Carter for another second. I would never forgive him. Even though the baby in my belly might keep us from completely cutting ties, I could raise the child on my own and sever all connections with this man. Ethan Carter was terrified, crying and begging me not to leave. I don't even want to look at him for another second. Every moment fills me with disgust. Then get out of here. Don't ever show up in front of me again. Ethan Carter burst into tears, his usual pride and composure completely shattered. I'm not going anywhere, Emily. This is our home, my wife is here. You're carrying my child, where do you expect me to go? Emily, I was truly wrong. Can you please give me another chance? I swear I'll never make this mistake again. I beg you, don't harm your health over this. He clung tightly to me, refusing to let go. As we struggled, the doorbell rang. It was my mother. Ethan Carter opened the door, and as soon as my mother saw the situation, she didn't say a word. She slapped him twice. He didn't even have time to react, his face was already swollen and unrecognizable. Without packing any of my belongings, my mother grabbed my hand and pulled me away immediately. Ethan Carter tried to stop me, but I silenced him with one sentence: "Ethan Carter, from this moment on, we are officially over. The moment you snuck around with Olivia Smith, you should have known this day would come." The elevator descended. Exiting the hallway, I got into the car. My mother didn't say a word, she quietly drove me away from this apartment complex. My body no longer felt as uncomfortable, but the torment in my heart grew more and more painful. When Ethan Carter first took me house hunting, he mentioned that there was an excellent kindergarten nearby and that this area had the most beautiful greenery. We shopped for furniture together, transforming the empty house into a cozy little home bit by bit. He and I decorated this place together. The adorable figurines on the bedroom windowsill, the bowls and plates in the kitchen, the bookshelf filled with parenting books I flipped through every day, the baby stroller that Ethan Carter assembled with his own hands. I left too many memories in this house. How could I truly leave it behind? How could I walk away without regret when, over the years, he and this house had witnessed our love? But precisely because of that, there was no way back for me. It was Ethan Carter and Olivia Smith who shattered all my illusions, destroying everything good. Tears streamed into my mouth, bitter as gall. Outside the window, the cold wind broke the tree branches. Inside the car, the warmth of the heater couldn't thaw my frozen heart. We remained silent the entire ride until we reached the house of my childhood. My mother helped me into the house. Looking at the travel photo on the shoe rack, just my mother and me, young and beautiful, standing under an ancient city wall, with no trace of my father, I completely broke down. "Mom, I'm sorry." I cried so hard I couldn't breathe, tears falling uncontrollably. "I didn't listen to you, and now I've ruined everything. Maybe in the future, I'll have to raise my child alone too." My mother's eyes were red as well. She could no longer maintain her usual strength. She held my hand but didn't dare grip it too tightly. This time, she didn't scold me. She silently wiped away my tears, swallowed her own pain, and comforted me. "You didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing to worry about. It's just one more child, don't worry. I'll raise them. I've done it before." During the days I stayed at my mother's house, she completely set aside her work at the spa to focus on taking care of me. Honestly, I felt very guilty, but I couldn't show it. All I could do was rest and take care of my pregnancy, trying my best not to make her worry too much about me. However, someone was determined not to let us have peace. Ethan Carter was like a madman searching for me, showing up almost every day to beg. At first, his face was still slightly swollen, clear evidence that my mother hadn't held back when dealing with him. Ethan Carter apologized nonstop, knelt down, cried, and played out all kinds of dramatic scenes in front of our house, but my mother remained unmoved, resolutely refusing to let him step inside. Even though the commotion drew attention from others, my mother wasn't the least bit embarrassed. The neighbors would find out sooner or later anyway. I didn't care about being gossiped about either, because I wasn't the one who had made the mistake. At first, he begged me to return home. Then, day by day, he started bringing soup for me, followed by parenting books, maternity clothes, and pregnancy essentials from that house to my mother's house. But I didn't look at him even once. I felt both bitter and indifferent. Years of affection cannot withstand the temptation of a fleeting moment. What's the point of doing these things? He used to be the perfect partner, someone I thought I could spend my entire life with. But now, when I think of him, all I see is a joke. I proposed a divorce, but Ethan Carter adamantly refused, so I had to seek help from a lawyer. When he received the agreement, he outright refused to sign the papers. He knew I was serious, so he sent me countless messages filled with apologies and promises, assuring me he would never do anything wrong again. I deleted all those messages without even reading them. My mother asked if I had thought it through, whether I would regret it later. I wiped away my tears, lowered my head, and placed my hand on my belly. This path is full of challenges, but I know I can walk it. Soon, this child will be born. I am both overjoyed and worried. But this child is everything I have nurtured and cared for all this time. How could I ever let go? It would be no different from destroying a life. From now on, this child will be mine alone. I have only one request, for Ethan Carter to stay away, as far away from me and the child as possible. Chapter 5. Olivia Smith had come over several times, but each time, my mother chased her away. The amount my mother used to care for Olivia Smith was now matched by how much she despised her. Once, when my mother and I were about to head to the hospital, Olivia Smith stubbornly blocked our path to apologize. She was sobbing uncontrollably, looking utterly pitiful, as if she was only one step away from kneeling down. Seeing that people around us had started raising their phones to record, my mother, afraid of causing a scene that could trouble the hospital, reluctantly agreed to talk at a cafe on the first floor. I remained silent, curious to hear how Olivia Smith planned to apologize. If it had been a random stranger sitting across from me, I might not have cared at all. But with Olivia Smith, I couldn't stay indifferent. My feelings for her ran deeper than even those for Ethan Carter. Olivia Smith no longer carried her usual cold demeanor. She admitted that she was an unredeemable person, her biggest mistake being losing control and hurting me. If you brought us here just to hear this nonsense, can we leave now? The damage was done, no words could undo it. I didn't want my emotions to fluctuate too much, fearing it might affect the baby in my womb, so I tugged at my mother's hand to leave. Olivia Smith panicked, quickly grabbing my hand, but then, afraid she might hurt me, she let go right away. She looked up, her eyes red and glistening with tears, and then she slapped herself. She was terrified I would walk away, her face filled with desperation. Emily, don't you want to know how I ended up falling into Ethan Carter's arms? Honestly, I don't want to know. I find it disgusting. But what I don't understand is, you two never got along before, how could you secretly do something like this behind my back? Don't tell me it's because he wasn't satisfied. I spoke in one breath, gripping my mother's hand tightly. She squeezed my hand back, as if to tell me not to be angry. Olivia Smith burst into tears, looking utterly miserable. Emily, you might not believe this, but I've been suffering from severe depression for years, ever since my parents divorced. After moving abroad, my condition worsened. I always wanted to find a chance to tell you, but during those years, you were so happy with Ethan Carter, I couldn't bring myself to ruin your joy. So, I quietly sought treatment, took medication without letting you know, thinking everything would eventually get better. Honestly, from the very beginning, I didn't like Ethan Carter. I hated his overly rigid personality, and felt like he had taken you away from me. You were no longer my one and only best friend. I couldn't monopolize your time anymore, nor did I want to burden you with my negativity. I couldn't release my emotions, and my condition kept getting worse. After switching to a new company and working on the same project with Ethan Carter, I realized I had been too hostile toward him. Ethan Carter listened to you and treated me very kindly. There was a time when we were on a business trip. During a meal with a client, one of them deliberately harassed me, spilling wine on my thigh and continuously making unwanted advances. I was forced to drink excessively and couldn't resist. Ethan Carter rushed in and hit the man, creating quite a scene. That night, both of us were drunk. Perhaps I had been lonely for too long, sad for too long, and lost control due to the alcohol, so I couldn't restrain myself, and something happened between us. At first, we both deeply regretted it. I thought about confessing my mistake to you, kneeling down to beg for your forgiveness, but I was too weak. I began to crave the feeling of being cared for, the way he cared for you. Ethan Carter said he was afraid that if you found out, it would harm your health, so we promised each other to wait until the baby was born before confessing. No matter what, we would try to ask for your forgiveness. But we couldn't stop ourselves, one mistake led to another, sinking deeper and deeper into the abyss. I'm sorry, Emily, I truly made a mistake. You can hit me, scold me, but please don't abandon me, okay? You're the only friend I have, and I'm more afraid of losing you than even Ethan Carter." My mother held back her anger, listened to the entire story, and finally couldn't contain herself any longer. She grabbed the glass of water on the table and threw it straight into Olivia Smith's face, but didn't say a word to her. As for me, I didn't even realize when I had started crying. I feel heartbroken for Olivia Smith's depression, heartbroken for her lonely days abroad, and heartbroken when she was harassed by clients. She has been my best friend since childhood, how could I not feel devastated? But can those reasons justify her betrayal of me? I feel exhausted and signal to my mother that we can go home now. Olivia Smith finally breaks down, sobbing uncontrollably, trying to hold me back, but my mother brushes her hand away. She lifts her tear-streaked face to look at me, her usually expressive eyes now blurred and devoid of their usual sparkle. This woman, this face, how has it become so unfamiliar to me now? Without hesitation, I slap her across the face. This is the slap she owes me. But she owes me far too much, and I no longer want to give her the chance to repay it. My belly was nearing the due date, and my mother and I had finally enjoyed a few peaceful days. But then Ethan Carter's mother showed up. She had heard that Ethan Carter and I had broken up, so she traveled all the way from her hometown to plead on behalf of her son. Out of consideration for how difficult things must also be for her, my mother didn't turn her away. She told me to go into my bedroom and not come out, then poured her a cup of tea, though she didn't act particularly welcoming. I could hear the two of them talking in the living room, their voices growing louder and louder. Eventually, it seemed like my mother-in-law started crying, her voice choking with emotion. I heard her say that Ethan Carter had worked hard at the company, that he had sacrificed a lot for this family, and that he truly realized his mistakes now. She begged me to forgive him. She even said that all men make mistakes sometimes, that every marriage has its share of arguments, but in the end, couples always reconcile and move forward together. Hearing this, I couldn't hold back anymore. I was so furious I couldn't believe my ears. I stormed out of the bedroom, unable to process what I had just heard. "I'm not as forgiving as you are. I can't forgive your son's mistakes. Not now, not ever." My mother-in-law looked at my heavily pregnant belly, her expression complicated, both happy and sorrowful at once. The woman hurriedly carried 2 boxes of specialties from the door into the house, her humility tinged with a hint of coercion. "Emily, I will definitely discipline Ethan Carter strictly, but look at you. With such a big belly, how can you give birth to a child without a father? I raised you alone back then, and it was very tough. You can't let yourself end up the same way." These words only made my mother angrier. "My daughter will live well even if she leaves your son. She doesn't need your guidance. Now that you've said your piece, take your things and leave. We don't need them." The two pushed back and forth, and just watching them made me feel overwhelmed. I was about to tell them to stop so I could have some peace when, suddenly, a sharp pain struck my belly. I let out a groan as cold sweat began to pour down my face. My mother immediately stopped arguing with my mother-in-law and rushed over to me. "Madam, it looks like the baby is coming. We need to get her to the hospital right away." At this moment, the most important thing was the baby inside me. Everyone was worried about me, and no one paid attention to the argument anymore. My mother drove the car, and the 3 of us headed straight to the hospital. Having to give birth under such circumstances was truly humiliating. On the way, my mother-in-law kept trying to call Ethan Carter, but I was in so much pain that I couldn't think about anything anymore, nor did I care. When I was wheeled into the delivery room, I thought I caught a glimpse of Ethan Carter. If it had been before, I would have longed for him to be by my side. Even though he couldn't share my pain, at least my heart wouldn't feel as empty and sorrowful as it does now. I prayed for the baby to be born safely. But could a child without a father truly live a happy life? My mind became chaotic, and the pain made my thoughts scatter. The excruciating agony of childbirth is something I will never forget. Many times, the pain was so unbearable that I felt like I couldn't go on, even wishing for death to end it all. But for my child, I couldn't give up. I had to endure this pain. I don't know how much time passed, but I was utterly exhausted, nearly losing consciousness, until I heard the faint cry of my baby. A nurse came to me, offering congratulations. The baby weighs 3.3 kilograms, a boy. As the pain subsided, I was so drained that I couldn't even utter a word. Before closing my eyes, in a hazy moment, I saw Ethan Carter rushing in, his face filled with worry, just like when he proposed to me, both panicked and overjoyed. Chapter 6. When I woke up, only my mother was in the room. She said the nurse had taken my son for a bath, and Ethan Carter, along with my mother-in-law, had gone with them. My mother, who cared deeply for me, stayed behind to take care of me. As soon as she saw me open my eyes, she started crying. She said that giving birth was like stepping through death's door, then asked if I was still in pain or feeling tired. I couldn't hold back my tears either, they silently flowed, soaking the pillow. My mother wiped my tears and tried to appear lighthearted. From now on, it'll just be the three of us living together. Are you afraid, my girl? I cried as I answered, weak but resolute, as long as you're here, I'm not afraid. Ethan Carter brought our son into the room. When he pushed the door open, his eyes were still smiling, but upon seeing me crying, his smile immediately faded. He hurriedly carried the baby closer to me. Emily, look at our son. His eyes are so beautiful, just like yours. My mother-in-law also stepped forward, her face beaming with joy. That's right, he's so beautiful. He must have inherited all the best features from his parents. Look at my precious grandson, isn't he just adorable? These words made me feel truly uncomfortable. My mother let out a soft hum, took the baby from Ethan Carter's hands, and placed herself as a barrier between me and them. I no longer had the energy to care about them. I just leaned on the posture of my mother holding the baby and looked closely at my son. The tiny baby made it hard to tell who he resembled, but the feeling of this as my child was so magical that my eyes blurred with tears again. To have this child, I had endured so much pain, yet joy still filled my heart. 10 months of pregnancy, this baby had once been a part of my body, and now he was separate, transforming into a small living being before my eyes, as if I were living in a dream. But the person who had just carried the baby into the room was the very one who had shattered that dream of mine. I looked at Ethan Carter. He seemed to realize something, approached me gently, and called softly, "Honey," then said, "You've worked so hard. My love, let me take you home, okay? I truly know my mistakes now. From now on, can we be a happy family?" Even though these words came too late, I suddenly understood why Olivia Smith didn't like Ethan Carter before, because he was too fake, full of hypocrisy. How ironic that, in the end, I had to see through him with her help. It's truly bitterly ironic. My lips were dry, and my throat felt parched. I steadied myself and said, "I am no longer your wife, and from now on, my son has nothing to do with you either." Ethan Carter's mother tried to use the child to persuade me, while Ethan Carter begged tearfully, but my mother was determined to sever all ties with their family. For the first time, I saw my mother so furious that it even scared me. The child cried out in fear, making the hospital room noisy enough that a nurse had to come in and remind us to quiet down. In the end, both of them had to give in to my mother and were driven out. The road to divorce is still long, but first, I need to recover my health. After I was discharged from the hospital, my mother took me home for postpartum recovery, even hiring a housekeeper to take care of me. Ethan Carter still wouldn't give up. Every day, he came at the same time, bringing nutritious soup, but my mother always took it downstairs to feed the dog. In the evenings, he would show up with a bouquet of flowers and piles of baby supplies, standing outside the door, too afraid to come in. All those things were also unwanted by my mother, she donated them to the community instead. The housekeeper could only sigh at the situation in our home but didn't dare say much. Lately, I've been sleeping very poorly. I wake up multiple times during the night to breastfeed, and when I do sleep, I have nightmares. One afternoon, shortly before my baby's 1-month celebration, I was startled awake from a nap. In my dream, all I saw was blood, and there was no one around. Suddenly, someone pushed me to the ground, leaving me terrified and jolting me awake. When I opened my eyes, it was almost evening. My mother had just come home, and I felt my eyelids twitching nonstop. She told me she had just run into Ethan Carter downstairs and had scolded him, bringing her frustration back home. Due to postpartum hormonal changes, I was very emotional, easily angered, and found fault in everything during my recovery period. On top of that, the nightmare left me feeling shaken, and I ended up arguing with my mother. Then from now on, can you stop caring about me? The child, frightened by my outburst, burst into tears in the bedroom, making everyone in the house even more irritated. The housekeeper tried to console the child, but to no avail. I decided to go into the room to check on them, only to hear the sound of my mother slamming the door as she left. After calming down, I called her. She said she was on her way to the spa because one of the staff had reported some trouble. As we spoke, the line on her end suddenly became noisy. I could hear the voices of men and women, mixed with cursing and the sound of objects crashing. Suddenly, I heard my mother scream, and then the call was cut off. A bad feeling surged through me, my eyelids twitched uncontrollably, my heart raced wildly, and an overwhelming sense of dread consumed me. I quickly called the spa, but no one answered, despite several attempts. I then tried calling Grace Miller, a close employee of my mother. It wasn't until the 10th or so attempt that someone finally picked up. I immediately asked about my mother's condition, but all I could hear on the other end was heart-wrenching sobbing. Grace Miller's voice was shaky and choked with emotion as she stammered, the owner, she was stabbed multiple times, there's so much blood, the ambulance hasn't arrived yet, please come quickly. I nearly collapsed to the ground, my ears ringing, my mind completely blank. In that moment, my entire world seemed to come to a halt. I no longer cared about anything, rushed downstairs in a frenzy, not even taking the time to grab a coat. Barefoot, I ran so fast that I lost one of my slippers, but I didn't even notice. Behind me, the housekeeper's voice called out, but it was as if I couldn't hear anything. Ethan Carter hadn't left yet, his car was parked right in front of the building. Seeing me panic and run out, he immediately rushed to catch me. The freezing wind slashed across my face like a blade, the pain causing tears to stream uncontrollably, leaving me unable to speak. I hadn't waited for the elevator earlier, but instead dashed straight down the stairs. Running too fast made my stomach ache, and my legs felt like jelly. As Ethan Carter supported me, I couldn't help but collapse. He asked me what had happened, but I could only choke out fragmented words. My mom. Take me to the spa, quickly. The spa wasn't far from the apartment complex, and the car sped there in no time. As soon as I got out of the car, the scene before me left me stunned. An ambulance, police cars were already there, surrounded by a police cordon and a crowd of onlookers. I staggered out, seeing pools of blood on the ground, and frantically pushed through the crowd. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw my mother lying there, dressed thinly, motionless. My heart ached so much it felt as if it would stop beating. I screamed at the people around me, "Where's the ambulance? Where's the doctor? Why didn't anyone save her?" A police officer stepped forward to hold me back, telling me to calm down. He opened his mouth and told me that my mother had stopped breathing. My ears buzzed again, and I vaguely heard the officer's words, his voice cold like the chilling winds of December, carrying a verdict of truth I refused to believe. I shook my head violently, still screaming, "Why didn't they come? Why didn't they come to save my mother?" But my voice gradually weakened, drained of all strength. The rationality within me seemed to shatter, shifting from questioning to pleading, until I saw them preparing to pull the white cloth over my mother. I used my body to block them, collapsing to the ground in utter despair, begging everyone around me, "Please, save my mother, please." Ethan Carter draped his coat over me, trying to help me stand, but he couldn't lift me, not even with the help of the police. I remained there, slumped over my mother, clutching her tightly, pressing against her heart that had stopped beating, crying until my soul felt torn apart. Around me, People whispered about the perpetrator, the sound of phone cameras clicking echoed, Grace Miller and other staff said something behind me, and even Ethan Carter spoke, but it all felt distant, as if I couldn't hear anything at all. The winter was so cold, yet my mother was dressed too thinly. I wanted to use my body heat to warm her, hoping she would wake up soon. Perhaps she had been in too much of a hurry and fell, unable to get back up. Perhaps it was my fault, for I had said such harsh words, making her angry enough to faint. Next time, don't care about me anymore, okay? Those words felt like a curse, and I believed I would never forgive myself for the rest of my life. Chapter 7. Accepting the truth is too difficult. When I stood in the morgue, looking at my mother, cold and pale, I truly realized that she was gone forever. Even though Ethan Carter tried everything to win my favor, I no longer had the heart to care about him. He wanted to visit our son many times, but I bluntly turned him away. Olivia Smith kept changing numbers to call me, but I blocked them all one by one. Compared to losing my mother, her death, the things Ethan Carter and Olivia Smith did seemed insignificant. In the investigations related to the case, I always maintained a cold attitude, showing no leniency. When my mother left, I finally became her replica. I held on to the anger in my heart, learned to be tough like her, and because of that, everything seemed to resolve much more easily. But most of the time, I felt like I had lost all motivation to live. Living like an empty shell, that was almost my daily state. People around me worried I might have dark thoughts, and even I had considered giving up on everything. But now, I have my son, he is the only family I have left. For him, I must try to keep going. Finally, I waited for the day the culprit was punished. He confessed to all his crimes. According to the investigation results, he, unable to succeed in pursuing a girl, decided to take revenge on society and went to the beauty salon where she worked to cause trouble. My mother clashed with him while trying to protect the customers, and in a fit of rage, he heartlessly killed her. It is said that the perpetrator's family also holds a respectable position. His parents were heartbroken by their son's crime but were still willing to take responsibility under the law. Hearing such words might seem like they pass lightly through the ears, but in my heart, they weigh as heavily as a mountain. I wish he could immediately face justice and descend into hell. During that time, I lived in a haze. Apart from cooperating with the police and consulting with lawyers, I also had to take care of the work my mother left behind at the spa. After this major incident, the spa business plummeted uncontrollably, and I had to handle staff issues and take care of customers. I couldn't leave all the responsibility of taking care of my son to the nanny because, now, my son is the only motivation helping me endure the hardship. His peace is what I long for the most. Additionally, I had to find a way to arrange my schedule to return to work. During those dark days, work became a temporary refuge where I could breathe a sigh of relief. I am truly fortunate to have earned the trust of my company's leadership. Director Anna Johnson and the entire team were always ready to welcome me back. As for the divorce from Ethan Carter, it now seems like a trivial matter. When I first learned the truth, it felt like the sky was falling. But now, looking back, it all feels like a nightmare. I live a hurried life, seemingly ordinary on the surface, but only I know that in the quiet of late nights, I still sneak out to the balcony and cry silently. Tears soak my shirt, while the sorrow weighs heavily in my heart. Sometimes, when I hold my child in my arms, I suddenly cry as well, but then, seeing my child smile, I can't bear to let the tears fall. My son grows bigger each day, and I have registered his household name. I named him Noah Carter, hoping his future will be peaceful and his life filled with serenity. I took a portrait of him, and another photo of me holding his tiny hand. I placed them next to a picture of me and my mother together. In this way, it feels as if the 3 generations of us are reunited. Busy during the day, caring for my child at night, I gradually feel the weight of a mother's responsibility. I only regret that my mother is no longer here. My mother was a strong woman her entire life, independent, resilient, always decisive in the face of challenges, and never one to give up. Even though she was strict and often nagged, she will forever be the hero in my heart. I just wish so deeply that she could stay with me a little longer. We promised to rely on each other through these times, so why did she leave me and go away like this? The investigation concluded, and the culprit was sentenced to death with a heavy penalty. Compensation for the death, funeral expenses, and other reparations are also about to be resolved. With tearful eyes, I arranged my mother's funeral, the despair of yesterday now receding. I mustered the strength to bid her a proper farewell. At the funeral home, many of my mother's former clients and friends came, they hugged me and cried. Bouquets and words of condolence brought me immense comfort. Ethan Carter insisted on staying with me to watch over the casket, his eyes were even redder than mine, and for the first time I didn't push him away. Inside the mourning hall, even with the heater on, I still felt cold, waves of chills washing over me. I just wanted to call my mom to wake her up, to hear her nag a little more, to ask if she felt warm enough. Ethan Carter advised me to get some rest, but I ignored him, trying hard not to sleep. I intended to ask the housekeeper about my son's situation, but then noticed an email from Olivia Smith in my inbox. Emily Young, this might be the last letter, and also my final confession. Please, I beg you to read it all. I know I no longer deserve to be by your side, but when I heard about your aunt, my biggest concern was still you. Do you know? In truth, you're such a crybaby. When I was little, whenever you got hurt, you wouldn't say anything but silently cried alone. I knew it all. Also, honestly, I never liked eating boiled snails or pig intestines, but I didn't want to lose my only friend like you. Unfortunately, now I've truly lost you. I guess this time you've cried too, haven't you? I hate myself for not being there to comfort you, for not being able to face everything with you. I think I am the biggest sinner here. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have had to leave home, you wouldn't have had to endure the pain of childbirth alone, and you wouldn't have had to bear all the responsibility of raising the children. Maybe, your aunt wouldn't have passed away so suddenly either. I don't know if saying this makes you feel any better at all. After confessing to you, Ethan Carter and I completely ended things, and both of us have faced the consequences. He was repeatedly complained about by clients, removed from the project, and is about to be fired, but that happened after I resigned. Before leaving my job, I still went with the project team to entertain clients, but that time I encountered even worse scumbags. They got my colleague drunk, drugged me, and took me to a hotel. Lying on that bed, I knew no one could come to save me anymore. I was completely filthy, and I think this is divine punishment. My family helped report to the police and filed lawsuits, but every day, I could only go insane in front of them. I couldn't contact you, and I have no friends left. The depression worsened, almost crushing me. I tried slitting my wrists, so they threw away everything sharp in the house. I took a lot of sleeping pills and was taken to the hospital again for stomach pumping. Don't pity me, these things are my own doing. From the moment I hurt you and your aunt, I knew I wouldn't have a good ending. By the time you read this email, I might already be on a flight to Country M. After many failed attempts at ending my life, my parents decided to send me to a rehabilitation center over there. Honestly, from start to finish, Ethan Carter has always been your Superman, while I'm just the monster that ruins everything, deserving to be defeated and cast away. I will disappear on my own and never bother you again. I just regret that I've never met my adopted child, but I'm sure the boy is very handsome, perhaps with eyes resembling yours. Aunt has witnessed you and me growing up since we were little, like a second mother to me, and I've wronged her too much. I will go to hell, while I hope Aunt will find peace in heaven. Lastly, Emily Young, could you cry a little less? Without me, this terrible friend, your life would surely be much brighter. I once hated Olivia Smith and blamed her, but she did not deserve such a tragic fate. Those despicable people are the ones who truly deserve to go to hell. I wonder what Ethan Carter would think if he knew about all of this. A lingering sadness, like the night enveloping me. I stayed awake all night, sitting until dawn. I wiped my face, knowing it was time to send my mother to be cremated. Seeing my mother's body pushed inside, the pain in my heart was so overwhelming that I could no longer cry out loud. I remember when I was little, shortly after moving to City B, my father passed away. But his departure feels so distant, so far away that I can no longer recall the sorrow I felt back then. As a child, the pain seemed much lighter. As long as I could play and mess around with Olivia Smith every day, life felt far less burdensome. But now, with my mother gone too, it feels as if the sky has collapsed. My entire world has shattered, and I have truly lost my family. The joy and comfort of childhood have vanished forever, never to return. I leaned on Ethan Carter's shoulder and broke into uncontrollable sobs. I swear, this will be the last time I lean on him. Because this pain is too intense, suffocating me to the point where I can hardly breathe. Holding the small urn in my hands, I tried to console myself. Look, Mother will still come back to be with me. Witnessing my mother being cremated, the last ounce of strength within me was drained. But I knew I had to rise, to handle everything properly. Now, I needed to return to my son. Ethan Carter wanted to come along, but I refused. My mother was gone, Olivia Smith had almost been lost too. Life is so fragile, and it was time for Ethan Carter and me to end things here. Thank you for being by my side to bid farewell to my mother, but this is the end. I no longer have the strength to say anything more to you. From now on, don't come looking for me. Let's get a divorce. Ethan Carter looked up, gazing deeply into my eyes. I could feel the light in his eyes had completely faded, dim and desolate. I also noticed the bloodshot veins in his eyes. It wasn't an act. He paused for a few seconds, tears silently falling. His face, changed over the years, was no longer the man I once loved. Finally, he accepted the truth with a soft, choked voice, "All right. Take care of yourself, Emily Young. For the rest of my life, I owe you." The chapter between Ethan Carter and me finally came to a close. He left with nothing but empty hands. My son stayed with me, the house was mine too, but I didn't want his savings. In these tough economic times, I heard his old project team was dissolved, and he had also been laid off. But all of that no longer has anything to do with me now. When Noah Carter turned 6 months old, my boss, Ms. Johnson, invited me for a conversation. She said the company was opening a new branch in City C and asked if I wanted to lead the team there. When my mother passed away, she attended the funeral, knew everything that happened in my family, but didn't offer too many words of comfort. She only hoped that after I handled my family matters, I could quickly refocus on work because there were still many projects waiting for me. I remember she left me with one sentence: "Nothing is too important, life is just a series of dreams, whether beautiful dreams or nightmares, they all eventually end." Now, it seems this dream is finally coming to an end. I decided to take Noah Carter to City C. After receiving all the compensation money from my mother's death, I dealt with the spa and the 2 houses. I also sold Ethan Carter's house. All unnecessary belongings, I donated them all. I want to leave this place with my son Noah Carter, as lightly as possible. Since I was young, I've always felt like a rootless child, lost in City B for so many years, and now I can no longer return to City B. I arrived here burdened, but now I leave weightless. The plane took off, and 3 hours later, it landed in City C. Ms. Johnson had already contacted Ms. Brown, a local partner, to pick me up at the airport. I held my child while calling her. When picking up the luggage, I coaxed Noah Carter to watch the suitcase spinning on the conveyor belt. The child smiled brightly, cheerful, innocent, and carefree. Suddenly, I heard a phone ringing nearby, playing the familiar song Ultraman, "No need for you to save the world, I know you also have moments of sorrow. It's just that they don't understand, maybe we won't always be together, but I'll fly to your galaxy, and send you my greeting." It felt as if everything belonged to a past life. My thoughts suddenly drifted back to when I was 18 or 19, to the times Ethan Carter and I argued fiercely over adjusting a detail in a plan. We were so young, unaware of the vastness of the world, standing against the school. Because of that project, we traveled together to the sponsor's city to negotiate, delivered speeches at award ceremonies, and experienced the lively noise in the KTV. It all felt as if it had just happened yesterday. But that youth, brimming with hope and audacity, had long since faded away. I didn't realize I was crying until little Noah Carter reached out to touch my face, instinctively wiping away the tears. Looking at my child's smile, I brushed aside the wandering thoughts. After collecting our luggage, I carried my son through the security gate, as the airport's loudspeaker echoed, "Please continue moving forward. Do not stop here."